Hi, dear viewers. Thank you once again for watching this video. We're talking about security controls. How do test control, implement controls, and also how do you evaluate information security control design adequacy? That is what this video is all about, because when you have control in place, how do you ensure that they are working effectively? How do you ensure that they are doing what they are meant to do? And so basically, we have a learning objective for this particular um, uh, video. And the learning objective at the end of this video, if you will watch this video to the end, which I encourage you. These are some of the things you would have learned. What are security controls and various types of security controls, and then how to design and implement security controls. Also, what are the sources of security control that we want to implement? Where do they come from? How can we have access to these controls? And then how do we test controls to ensure that they are working? And then also finally we'll look at how to evaluate, you know, control design adequacy. And just a reminder that we have a lot of interview videos on GRC on this channel, which I will encourage you to go through and a successful interview on any GRC role. And so let's proceed. What is control, or security control? Basically, is safeguard or measures, that are deployed, you know, either to prevent, detect, correct, or mitigate and reduce risk. So these terms are used interchangeably. Remember, this does not mean that this is the standard definition of control, but in a layman's language, talking about deploying safeguards, measures. You want to protect your asset, you want to protect your information. So basically, everything we do in cybersecurity to protect our information, data, sensitive data, we use controls to do everything. So when we talk about cybersecurity, it's the preservation of the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of information. What we use to ensure this preservation of the CIA are all controls, safeguard. So let's look at for example, if people go to the types, we're talking about we need to protect people from accessing our account. We want to have password, good password security in place. So that password security that we are having in place is a control. So let's look at type of controls. Generally, we have administrative controls, you know, like when you train your staff, when you document policy, write procedure, or you come up with rules and regulations. So these are administrative control that is to keep things in check and provide and protect people from prevent people rather from making mistakes. So that's administrative control. We have technical control or technological control, what is called logical controls. These are control that involve the use of technology. For example, if you want to implement factor authentication, encryption, you want to implement password. These are technical control that you can only achieve with the aid of technology. So we have physical control. Physical control to do with how you monitor your environment, how you restrict entries, unauthorized entries to some rooms, to environment, to restricted areas, even your main entrance to your building. You have receptionists there that monitors movement in and out, ensuring that the right people get in. You use locks, give people locks. They cannot enter without locks, badges. You operate clean desk policies, like, don't put anything on your desk and then don't leave papers on your desk, or you have a good control. So this is physical, controlling your physical environment. Or you can't go into the server room, not everybody can get in there. So these are physical controls. And then We have preventive control. This stops something from happening. When you say preventive control, we're talking about what are the controls you put in place, to prevent or stop attacks. So, like intrusion prevention system, CCTV, and all that. So, and then we have what we call detective. Detective controls. Like there are gadgets or stuff that can alert you and detect any danger or threat, alert you, by way of email or something. So some of them are fire alert, flood alert, power alert, and all that. So, and then we have what is called corrective, control. Corrective control basically deals with trying to reduce or minimize the impact. Now, in this case, we're not able to prevent the control. That means we're not able to prevent the threat or damage or harm. That means it has happened. So we have to take measures, take measures to ensure that we reduce the impact or the effect, and also to restore normalcy to our system. So that's taking corrective action. So other ones is compensating control, talking about trying to get implement a less expensive or an alternative measure. For example, if you cannot implement recapture, you can implement multi-factor, strong password. So trying to look at what other controls can we implement that can serve the same purpose rather than going for expensive ones. So that's basically types of controls. And then well, before we continue, just 1 minute of your time. If you have not subscribed to this video, support us in any way you can, because it takes a lot of effort and to put these videos together. And subscribe if you have not, like, share, comment if there's anything you want us to do, or any topic, and then also you can, if you want to join our membership list, we have a join button uh, below this video that you can join and enjoy a lot of benefits. Or if you want to just buy us a cup of coffee, if you feel like, okay, let's just buy these guys a cup of coffee, you can do that. There's this link. This link will be on the video description. And so thank you for that. As we proceed, thank you for your support. And then our contact details are also there for you if you need any of our services as well. And that include, we also provide JARS training. We will do consulting, mentoring, mentor you for interviews and on the job as well. Prepare you for interview, help you with your resume preparation and job experience and all that. So that's basically one of our services. And so let's continue. So how do you or design and implement security controls? Because we say security controls, measures or safeguard. Remember, if you are doing an interview, they ask you what is a control. Use the right words. That word measures or safeguards must be there, deployed to protect, threat or defend, to prevent threats. Safeguard measures must be part of it, of your description. So how do you design or implement security control? So if we want to implement a particular control, there are some steps you need to take. First of all, we want to know what risk are we exposed to, what threat are we exposed to. So you need to kind of do a kind of risk assessment on your environment or the particular issue. So what threat are we exposed to? What risk is there, to prevent, or what are we trying to protect? So you do a kind of risk assessment, and then when you have done your risk assessment, it does not follow a particular order. Then you define your control objectives, security objective. What objective does the control want to meet? You know, for example, if we say, what is your objective for that particular control could be like, we want this control to ensure the neutrality of our data. That no unauthorized person can gain access to our data. So you have defined the objective that the control is going to meet. It could be that, oh, the objective of this control is to ensure that we hire the right people without maybe criminal record. That means maybe possibly have to do with a background check or something like that. So you have to define the objective. What objective is he meeting? And then also, and then after defining the objective, you now come and select the appropriate control that you can deploy to meet that objective. So if you talk about, for example, we want to ensure that all our clients' data or record are safe, and we want to ensure that no outsider or stranger or attacker can gain access, and then we need to deploy um, um, password or good access control. So you choose the appropriate control. In this case, we'll choose access control to reach this objective that we have defined here. And then what else? So after selecting the control you want to deploy, so you now come and develop policy, topic specific policy and procedure. Remember, there is every control must have a policy. Every control you want to implement, whether access control, password security, encryption, they must have a policy, because this policy details how you want to implement the control. If, for example, you're talking about password security, this policy or this document details the complexity of that password. If it's 8 characters, the combination of numbers, and this is where you document it so that everybody will have the same, we will be on the same page. And then you now come up with a procedure on how you want to implement it. So, and then the next thing after you have defined your policy, you now start integrate this it's controls into organization, into your processes. You integrate this control. You ensure that the controls are seamlessly integrated into you have existing business process. Normally, like I used to say, we were doing business before internet came, and internet came and brought challenges, threat, and attacks. So now we want to incorporate security, cyber security, into our existing operation. So when we deploy this control, we have to incorporate the control into the operation. For example, a good example is that the HR used to hire before. Now they don't do background check. Now we want to start doing background check, which is the control we have selected. So, so we have to incorporate background check into the hiring process. So in other words, you have integrated that control into your organization process, into your existing process. So that's a good example. And then what we do is to implement. Once we target it, we start implementing it. In other words, we now, before we hire, we must do background check. So start implementation. And then you have to test that it's working. You have to monitor that it's working, test that it's working. For example, I'm going to see who was the last person that was hired, or the last few people that were hired, and then let's see evidence that the background check for them. So what are you doing? You are testing that what the controls is that they are working, and then you monitor and review controls. So in monitoring and review control, what are you simply doing? You are just looking at the performance of the control. You review them, regularly to ensure that they remain effective. You know, especially in the face of evolving threat and organizational changes. You know, and the controls they remain effective. So you are monitoring, just as talking about testing of controls, a part of monitoring. You're ensuring that the controls are they meeting your needs. You know, over time you review whether is it working as it should be, and so you monitor, and then you can continuously improve. Continuous improvement, because normally every policy is a live document. They need to be reviewed regularly. your controls need to be reviewed regularly. Because if you remain static, remember that attackers, they're always evolving, coming up with new strategy. So if you don't flow with the trend, if you remain static, very soon that control will be outdated, to no longer meet your requirements. So that's why it needs, continuous, improvement. So for a good example, if okay, for example, let me see, if we decide to perform penetration testing to evaluate the effectiveness of our network security controls. So to see, are we if we pen test our network or that's control, are we able to break? So, and if you're able to break it, that means you need to come up with um, a new improvement to that control. That you need to upgrade it or add additional layer of control to it. So that's continuously improving. Or maybe there are mistakes everywhere. You want to see that your staff are up to date. You keep training them and all that. So that's a way of improvement. So basically, that is how you design and then implement control. Remember, all this require the IT guys, configuration and all that. For example, if you're talking about password security, you want to implement a new password security, it requires configuration. So it to be configured, policies set, and agreed and implemented and tested and stuff like that. So basically, that is how you go about implementing your security controls. So the next one we're looking at is what are sources of security controls? I remember sometimes I've been asked, how do you get these controls? It's very simple. The controls, they are there. They are there in the different security standards or security frameworks. You have ISO 27001, NIST, PCI DSS, Cyber Essential, CIS, maybe Central for Internet Security, and OWASP, top 10 and all that. So basically, the um the control you want to implement depends on what standard or what framework you are operating. Or if you want to implement best practice, you can just choose any of these. So they all have these controls listed in these standards that you have to, and most of them also provide guidance on how you implement the controls. So also what kinds of security control? What you know the sources. What informs or what determines which control to choose or which control to implement. Now, basically, now they look at a couple of factors. It depends on the risk. You have assessed your risk, like we said in the previous slide. You have assessed your risk. So based on the result of that, your risk assessment, you have identified the risk you are exposed to, the threat, and the weaknesses or vulnerabilities in the system. So having identified that, okay, we have this weakness, then that is when you can now come up with, okay, this is the control that we can you can deploy to enhance or block that threat. So it's a function of what risk is available, what problem are you trying to solve, and then it also depends on security standard. For example, if you are talking about control around software development, life cycle, and all those application security, that you are going to use controls, WAP sub 10 or all these other standards have them. So, and also if you are implementing ISO 27001, that means the control that you are going to deploy will be based on control stated in ISO 27001. So on list or PCI DSS. For example, if you are implementing PCI DSS for the payment card industry, definitely they have their own unique control that you have to implement. So it also is a function of regulatory and the contractual requirement obligation. For example, if the regulators want you to have a particular control in place, definitely you have to implement that control because your regulators want it. Or if your client, key customer, they say if you don't implement this particular control, we will not be able to do business with you. Because you want to do business with the customer, you have to implement that control as long as it meets your security objective. So these are some of the things that determines your choice of control. And also let's look at how to test. How do you test controls? Or how do you validate that the controls they are working as they should? Basically, there are a couple of ways because normally if you implement control, you want to see that it's working as intended. Now, for example, your password security or your password control, in your policy, you say it is 8-character password. So how do you test that it's working? Simply try to create an account using 7 characters. And if you're able to create an account with 7 characters, it's an indication that your password control is not working as intended, because it's meant to be 8 characters and all that. So that's a typical way of testing. And so there are different ways. So first of all, what is control testing? Is like conducting tests and an assessment to ascertain if your control is, I've said it before, if they're working as intended. Is it meeting its purpose? Is it serving its purpose that it's intended for? And then also other ways are ways of testing control, because it could be an interview question, and then what is control testing and what are the ways we test control? Can be through internal auditing, through risk assessment, like we mentioned on the previous slide, risk assessment, how you test control, you could assess risk to see if this risk is still available, if it's still high or something like that. And then it could be also through vulnerability scanning. You can scan your system using vulnerability scanners, to assess if you can, identify weaknesses in control. And then also, you can also use penetration testing. It's a way of also testing your controls are working. Ethical hacking, to hack into your system legally to ensure that, to see if you can penetrate or break into your network, just the way attackers do. And then you have what is called routine validation check. Another way of testing control. It can just be, you might not be doing auditing or any other, but just routinely, let me just routinely check our backup control. So you can do routine checks, get the backup logs, and see if it's working. If your policy says backup daily, is your backup log showing that backup is being done every day? So you can routinely check your your controls. So these are ways of not all the ways. Yeah. So these are some of the ways that you can uh, test or validate that your control is working. And so let's move on to the next one. Then, how do you evaluate, a security control? How do you evaluate security control design adequacy? So let's not talk about design adequacy. We talked about implementation, design, and implementation of control. From the beginning. How do you ensure, assess whether these controls are adequate? They're actually meeting needs. Remember, there's a difference between testing of control and assessing adequacy of controls, design adequacy. So there's a difference between testing. We talk about testing of control. You are testing control to see if it is working. Like we mentioned, the use of password. We have 8 characters. Okay, I use 7 character. 7 character does not work. I try 8 characters. 8 character work. That means that the control is working. But the fact that the control is working does not mean that it is adequate. One thing is for control to work. Another is for the control to work, to be work adequately. So that's that. So So some of the way what are some of the ways you can evaluate to ensure that the controls design are adequate. And one of the ways is to check for control objective alignment. So what that means is that we're ensuring that your controls are meeting specific security objectives. Remember that in the um, beginning, we talked about you defining security objectives. Before you choose a control, you need to define control objective. The objective, for example, the objective is to for data confidentiality, because data confidentiality is very critical to your operation. And you say, okay, you want this control to meet, or data confidentiality criteria to ensure that no unauthorized person can access your system. And as a result of that, you chose to implement good password security and access control in place, multi-factor authentication and all that. So how do you ensure that the question is that are these controls meeting objectives? They're really protecting you. People able to easily hack into your system, and people able to easily guess your password. Are they able to easily look into client's account so if these are happening, it means that the control, though is working, but it's not working adequately, it's not meeting the objectives. So how do get information? You can use metrics, trends, events, metrics, for example, what are some of the things that were happening before, like incident, how many before and how many now, compare over a period of time. So that is how you can, ascertain if the control is really meeting up the objective, what it's meant designed to do, what it's designed to protect, is it protecting them? Then so let's go to the next one. The next one is how to assess control design adequacy. Is assessing whether the control is addressing all critical areas without gaps. Because when you implement a control, the control should be able to address different aspects of your business, different aspect of your business, different departments, different operations. So not just one section. It addresses, is it addressing critical areas of the organization, your systems, your processes, you know, and to ensure that there's no significant gaps. Let me give an example. A good example is your storage, where you store data, you know, and then normally, for data confidentiality, it's recommended that you deploy what is called encryption. You can encrypt data. Now you store data in your databases, file servers, in the cloud, on premise and all that. So the question is that when you encrypt your data, are you encrypting data are you deploying the same encryption around different storage areas? Or are you just encrypting data in your database and you don't encrypt data in your cloud? So I'm showing that, that encryption control, it covers the entire operation where it is needed rather than in some areas. So that's just a typical example. So let's another way to assess to evaluate your control design adequacy is how you tailor your control to specific industry, specific industry specific risk and regulatory requirement. Because we're talking about control, relevancy of control. How relevant is this, to your specific risk? And also is it meeting your regulatory requirement? Because your regulators, have need for, information security, have need for the same control. For example, the same control can satisfy your specific needs, your own requirement. Same control should satisfy, is it satisfying your regulatory requirement of your regulators? Is it satisfying the requirement of your clients or contractors? So is this satisfying the requirement of your the contractors or your customers require some for you to have controls in place. And if you don't have those controls in place, your clients or your customers will not do business with you. So is that control? Is it relevant to all this? Let me give you a typical example. But for every of these for every of these points where I'm going to give you specific examples. For example, you have password security in place, password control in place. Remember, your regulators might say the password must be 8 characters. And then you have your standard, security standard, different security standard that we mentioned before, like PCI DSS. They said their password must be 12 characters. Then you have another NIST or any other one that will say our password must be 14 characters. So now the question is that you can't have a password security or a password policy for each of those requirements. Now, how do you now ensure that you have one password security that will meet all the requirements? So definitely you must have one password security that will satisfy all the requirements of all your stakeholders, including your own business. So it must be relevant to all your operations. That's exactly what we are trying to establish. And then another area is are the controls effective? Control effectiveness. Apart from control effectiveness, you they operationally effective. But there's difference between having an effective control, and operational effectiveness of control. So we're going to look at it from both angles. So what you are trying to achieve here is that is the controls, are they mitigating risk effectively? Because when we say control is working fine, but is it effective? Effectiveness in the workings. Is it total? Is it complete? Although there's no control that that you say cannot be bypassed, but then if it becomes an easy thing for the attackers or whatever, that means yeah, it's not effective. So what are we trying to drive at here? We're talking about you know how well does each control mitigate identified risk? There is a risk. For example, you do risk assessment, you identify risk. Maybe risk around your access control. So how well does your access control policy or passwords policy, how well does it protect your data? How well does it ensure that people cannot easily guess your password? How well is it doing that? Maybe there are every time risk change. There's the risk they evolve. Every time the threats are changing, the attack vectors are changing. The attackers, they strategize, they come up with new attack method and attack vectors. How well is your control, existing control, be able to deal with all that? We're talking about effectiveness. Is it protecting? Is it identifying risk? Is it mitigating threats? Is it capable? You know, and then also, is it preventing incidents? Because when you have constant incident, you can usually tell that the controls are not effective. So for example, if you are implementing an intrusion detection system, that is IDS, to detect and alert you on potential cyber threats. How do you evaluate that the effectiveness of the IDS? So you have to, ensure you conduct regular testing, or you can even, do a kind of simulated attack. Try to, do kind of simulated or like ethical hacking attack to see if that IDS is working properly, it's effective. If for any reason out of 20 attack attempts on your system, the IDS is only able to detect maybe 5 of them out of 20. That means not effective. It can't protect you. So that means you need to do something about it. Yeah, you need to do something about it. And then talking about operational effectiveness. Operational effectiveness of control has to it talks about the effectiveness of the control over a period of time. You know, that means, if you are implementing that control, is it effective over a period of time? It was effective in January, was effective in February, in March. Or, for example, if you are talking about the backup policy, backup control, auditors are interested in the effective, not just in the effectiveness, but also interested in the operational effectiveness. In other words, are you implementing them consistently over a period of time? If you do backup in January, did you do in March? Did you do, or if you do background check in January, or employee that you employed in January, did you do for those in February? Did you do for those in March? So we're talking about over a period of time, how operationally effective, how is it meeting, how are you implementing, how is it working with your operation? And so that's about that. So let's look at the next one, and control integration. Normally when you implement control, you need to be integrated, like we said before, you need to be integrated into your operation. Are you able to do this seamlessly into your governance structure? You already have a structure in place. You have all your department, your management system in place, your accounting department, HR department. They are doing their job even without internet or without security. They are doing their job. They are doing their normal production. But you are bringing security in. You want to now put cyber security in place that will enable you to protect yourself. In doing that, you are going to implement or deploy controls. So are these controls able to, seamlessly integrate into your system? So we're talking about you know how does your overall governance structure, your policies, your procedure, how well do they accommodate these controls? Or is the control bringing problem? For example, there are some controls you want to implement, and it's like they are counterproductive, because you can't be protecting one side of the business and killing the other side of the business. So the control need to be integrated seamlessly, so that it will it will not just slow down your operation or hamper your operation or make you not to do business just because you want to protect yourself. It must be seamlessly, integrated. So that's what we're talking about. For example, we're talking about, let's look at your background check. You were doing by HR was hiring before now without background check, but now you are doing background check. So are you able to seamlessly incorporate that? So you are integrating that. So when you hire now, have to, you know, do background check before the hiring process can be said to be complete. So you have integrated, background check into the hiring process, and it must work seamlessly. Yeah. So even though it might be like additional responsibility, but it should not, affect the operation and the hiring process. So that is that. And then let's look at you know, control, consistency. Consistency in application of these controls. Remember, we're talking about design adequacy. So we're talking about consistency. So is it applied the same way across the organization? So is it consistently applied? I'm not talking about frequency now. I'm talking about uniformly applied across organization, or is it across department, or is one department applying a different control, different from what another department is implementing. So that if that is the case, you know, there's no consistency. For example, if you have a password length of 8 characters, it must be that every of your organization, they use 8 character password across board. Not that the finance department is having 6 characters on their own system, the HR department having, and your IT guys are having, so it must be uniformly applied. Or if you're talking about risk assessment, for example, risk assessment, if you're doing risk assessment and your organization, use qualitative risk assessment, or use a risk scale of 1 to 3, or you have for example, a minimum, a risk acceptance criteria of, okay, you say a particular risk level, if your risk level is above like 3, you must don't accept, you will treat. So that means everybody in your organization, assessing risk, whether it's IT risk or whether it's financial risk, anti-money laundering risk, operational risk, legal risk, they have to consistently use that same policy. So that is why you have a policy, and everybody must apply it. So that is what we're talking about, consistency. If it's not consistent, then that means the control design is not adequate. And then we're talking about scalability. We're talking about scalability, you're talking about whether the controls, whether they are scalable, or rather they are adaptable to accommodate changes in the organizational size, you know, and changes in technology, changes in environment, you know, ensuring that the controls can grow and evolve with the organization, you know. For example, if like you're a startup company or whatever, or you're not a startup company, you implement firewall solution, you know, can this firewall solution, can it be scaled as the company grows? So is the firewall, is it capable of handling increased network traffic? Maybe if your network traffic is small now, are you going to implement firewall that can accommodate an increase in your network traffic when your network traffic begin to grow now, or can it be easily upgraded, to accommodate additional users, additional devices? We're talking about scalability. But you don't just, when you are implementing control, you don't look at just the now. You look at the control that you implement that can accommodate increase in operation and can scale, adapt to accommodate when your operation increases. So that's what we're talking about. So it has to be scalable. And then the next one, talking about documentation. You have a standard document, a comprehensive guide to document that control. That's what we talk about. We're talking about policies. Every control should have a policy. We're implementing backup control, password security, joiners, movers, and leavers policy control. We're implementing encryption, authentication, access control. Each of them have to have a policy. So that policy, what the importance of policy is that it guides everybody. For anybody who wants to implement any of those controls, you go back to the policy and then the procedure. So for you to say the policy, is mature or it's adequate, you must have a documentation. Not as you are implementing policy without documenting how you want to implement it. How it should be implemented. That means anybody can come up and implement whatever he likes. Somebody can implement 8 character password in HR, another person implements 7 character, but you don't have a document. So there must be adequate documentation. And then so another way to assess the adequacy is control testing. We talked about testing before. How you regularly test, your control to ensure that they are doing what they should be doing. You can't have control in place that you don't test. You don't implement control which you don't test. You are not testing them regularly, because the controls can be, out of date, it can be, yeah, controls it may not be able to meet current security requirement. Like the control you have years back may not be effective now. So there's need for regular testing. When you have controls that are not be tested regularly, you can't say the control adequacy, the control design is adequate. And then lastly, talk about monitoring and improvement. Monitoring and improvement. This you need to establish mechanism for ongoing monitoring. Similar to the form we talked about before, testing. You monitor performance of these controls in terms of using metrics. So you keep monitoring for the purpose of improvement. And so how do you monitor? It's like regular, just as we just exactly what we said like you regularly review, you know, control effectiveness, tracking, you know, using security metrics, and so that you can implement continuous refinement, controls based on emerging threats and based on best practices. So you are monitoring, seeing how the control is working, see how effective they are, seeing whether they will need changes, seeing whether the controls are still meeting your needs, see whether the control can still be effective even when the threat landscape change. So for example, if you an example is like, when you monitor your security logs, like access logs, or to detect any anomaly or suspicious activities. So that's why companies do have, network monitoring tool like IDS, IPS, firewall and all that. So in other words, so when you check your logs, security logs, access logs, activity logs, then you can, based on your findings, you can decide to say, okay, our security need updates. We need to adjust our policy. Our firewall rules need to be enhanced. Our endpoint protection, need to be enhanced, need to be adjusted to better defend against evolving threats. So basically, that's all I have for this. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you watch it to the end, like I said, these are our services, these are our contact details. If you want one-on-one mentoring, if you have your training before, you want to get mentored to pass interviews easily, and if you want to support us, the link will be on this video. So thank you so much, and I'll see you in our next video. Bye for now.